This build feels wrong, but once it clicks, you will absolutely rip and tear through endgame content in the most hilarious way possible. Well, what's good everyone, it's Word here, and for the past couple of weeks now, ever since I've been playing around with those weird combos, I've been going deeper and deeper into the TDO rabbit hole. And finally, everything just clicks into place for me. So today, we're doing a full deep dive into one of the quirkiest but most satisfying Rafa builds that I've ever played so far. This is the Quarterback Rafa Tediore build. It is messy, it is ammo hungry, but when it works, it slaps. It is insane how strong it is. So look, if you like builds that explain why they work instead of just throwing gear at you, consider subscribing. I post Borderlands for builds and system breakdowns every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. See you there. So we're gonna get started with the talents, but look, in its purest form, this is a Peacebreaker Cannon Overdrive Indirect Projectile Rafa build. And the reason why this is so good is because all the TD are thrown little bubble of destructions. They count as indirect projectiles, and they scale with gun, splash, indirect projectile, ordnance. It is beautiful. If you think about it, this is a match made in heaven. So let's have a look at what talents are we taking. Now, first up is Citior. Gun damage is good damage. And next up is Juerga. Even though you do lose a little bit of value because you're not shooting that many bullets yourself, your cannons do, and the chance that they're gonna hit a bullet that it crits within the 4-second internal cooldown. So this one is still good. If you really hate it, you could go something more defensive. I'm not gonna hold it against you. And then you got to a crossroad. You could go Valiente because you're gonna start most of your fights on full shield, so that one is gonna give you a direct boost. But because you don't have a reliable way to get over shield, it does get iffy. I wouldn't blame you if you want to go 5 points into resiliency and just say that I never dying again. But no amount of resiliency is going to save you from your own damage. And the biggest danger is you. You're going to one-shot yourself any day. If it explodes too close to you, you're gone. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding how many points you're going to put into resiliency as to why you're doing it. Moving on then though. We're going to go asymmetric warfare, that is indirect projectile, and that is thrown guns, and they all count as one, so that's directly 45% boost. That's a good one. And then we're going to go into errant spark. Every single one of your chucks is going to always apply the bonus incendiary damage for 40%, and of course double the bonus damage if it already has an incendiary damage. That one is going to be insanely strong. And then we're going to put 1 point into lateral plinking. It doesn't affect the TDR. The TDR bubble explodes and then poof, this is it, that it's gone. But it does affect your rockets or your shotguns, and that one is still going to be very beneficial for some additional DPS. Now, I have 3 points into splash damage with barrage, but that one is the leftover points, so I'm highlighting it right now. But let's have a look at the other 20 points that are going into Apophis lands. 5 points into Rins. That one is going to be very good because the faster you reload, the faster you summon your little gun back, and then the sooner you can jog it again. Simple. And then we're going to go 5 points into the trial. Fire rate is still good. That isn't really a better option to do, so we're going to take that because you don't need ammo regen, you don't really need Padento because you're not going to constantly activate your action skill. So that one is still going to be the best beneficial. The same kind of goes into Al Centro. You really only get the action skill handling from this that is going to be a direct benefit, but it does actually kind of boost the DPS very nicely where it can narrow down and then the shotguns are just going to be laser focused. So that one is not bad at all. And then we're going to finish off with El Soldado for 5 points because that one is an overdrive skill and it's going to give you some sick damage. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the augment and the capstone. So for the capstone, it is simple. You're going to get double auto shot because that's the only one that you can get. So that one is going to be good enough. Now for the augment, you could go Instinto. That one is going to give you crit hit chance. That's going to affect your TDRs. And it's also going to give you the biggest longevity to your action skill. So that one is good. Or you could go Insta for battle system. That's going to give you ordnance damage. And that one is going to be very good for single target DPS where you don't care about how long does your action skill actually last. So decide it upon based on your situation and pick the one that suits you the best. And with the talents out of the way, let's head on over to the inventory because that one is a doozy. Now look, I'm not going to hold anything back. The best weapon that I found for the job was the Inscriber. With its insane core damage, this thing just absolutely bullies everyone. But because there is a lot of TDR guns, the Ruby Grass, the Husky Cream, the Murmur, not to mention any other gun with a TDR, I'll have a challenge for you because I cannot test everything myself within a reasonable amount of time frame, and I gotta get some goodies out the door. You let me know if you find any Tediore gun that's gonna do more damage than what I'm showing here in the clips, and if it does so, I'm gonna try it out, and if you're right, I'm gonna give you a shout out, and we have one more weapon to our arsenal. But moving on to the Repkit. I like the triple bypass here, mostly with tank, because that one is just gonna give me some more longevity. The one thing to note, I tried to be funny, and I thought that I'm just gonna shoot a bullet, amp myself, and then throw the gun, and then I'm gonna do massive amount of 200% damage. It doesn't actually work, it's only for the bullet itself, so that's not the goal. Which means that if you wanna do max damage, Enrage is gonna be your best option, and Splash. For this, I would honestly recommend going with Splash, because Enrage is just, you're gonna self-explode yourself even harder. For the shield, there is a couple of things to keep in mind. The biggest issue with this build is that you are very, very hungry for ammo. The reason for that is simple. You shoot a bullet, but then when you chuck it, you chuck your entire magazine. That's why you do so much damage with it. So in order to overcome that, I like the fireworks for mobbing when it's not a bossing example, because then they can just chain explode each other and it's beautiful. If you're bossing though, same as always. What's for the Protean Cell, those are exceptionally good. If you need survivability, obviously things like Onion, Guardian Angel, they are always going to be your go-tos, and they're going to be very solid. Now for the Ordnance, it really doesn't matter. This isn't a grenade Ordnance build. You would build it a little bit differently if that was the case. So I would just recommend going with something like a Swarm that is not invasive, it doesn't have a chance to kill yourself, and it still adds a little bit extra to it. For the class mode, here it is, unfortunately, I have to say that the best one is gonna be the Dancer. That one is just gonna give you so much more damage with the overdrive while it's up that it's ridiculous. However, for mobbing, you could go Green Berserker if there is a large group of enemies, because throwing multiple guns are gonna be better, but bear it in mind, if the second gun misses because it just goes yeet, it's not gonna be better at all. Dancer is always going to be the best ever, and for quality of life. That is very sad. I'm not happy about it, but it is the world that we live in. And lastly, for the enhancements, the one thing that you're looking for is banger, because that is money. 50% extra magazine added to the calculation is the GOAT, because gun damage is just going to get exponentially increased by that. Now, a purple with perfect rolls like gun damage, gun magazine size would be best in slot by all accounts. So try to aim for that if you can, but realistically speaking, you can see how shitty my enhancement and how much damage I'm doing. You're gonna be fine, yeah? And let's talk about the firmware. For the firmware, we're boosting 2 points in Gadget Ahoy for the Ordnance damage. We are putting 1 point into Get Throw-In for the Ordnance damage, and then we're putting 2 points into Airstrike for the splash damage and the splash radius. That is gonna help us with the AoE clearing, and it's gonna generally boost our damage. The reason why we take an Ordnance is because that one is gonna scale the guns the most. You could take 10% damage from bad SS, from high caliber, but you just lose the rest of the benefits. High caliber with the projectile speed, it doesn't apply at all to the thrown gun, so that just does nothing, so don't worry about that at all. What you could alternatively do is, because there is a world where you just want to go and save all the ammo outside of that you replace your Ordnance with another Airstrike, and then you're going to have 3 points into Airstrike for on-kill, drop a missile, and then you have your missiles killing, your fireworks killing, and you're just sitting there and just looking at mayhem, which is pretty fun to be fair. But for max damage, you'd want to go into Get Throw-In so that you can get that extra 35% Ordnance damage, because that's a lot. With all that out of the way, we got one thing left, and that's the Specialization. You guys know how I roll by now. And for the Specialization, it is the best defense, Riddle Uris, full spectrum arsenal, and fragmented payload. These are all gonna give you massive boosts. The best defense is 30% damage. That is gonna count as just regular old, good old damage. The Riddle Uris is not that bad to stack it up like as it would be on like a Mantra build. So here, we're actually going to make quite a good use out of it. And the full spectrum arsenal is going to give gun damage to Ordnance, so that's a little bit of a double dip. And then of course the fragmentation payload, because you can actually crit with Ordnances. Now, You could mess around a little bit that if you need to take something out with a little bit of less damage, but then take like now with caffeine so that you can always get back into your action skill if you're going so hard. Or I want to try contamination because I'm curious how hard you could get the incendiary dot to take at the end. But that one would be purely circumstantial, so not for now. But look, that's the quarterback Rafa Tediore build. It is not about being efficient, but it is about understanding the system and then abusing it properly. And once it clicks, it is going to be insane. Look, if you try this out and tweak it, let me know what worked for you and what didn't. And if you just want more builds like this and then dig into mechanics instead of just chasing meta numbers, you know what to do. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.